Hey friends, Cherie here. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to Vlogmas Day 12. Today I'm going to share a few more sewing patterns. These are patterns that I specifically want to sew for myself in 2026 using some of the quilters cottons that I carry in my Etsy store. So the first pattern that I pulled, I think overall is the easiest of the three, mainly because you don't have a lot of buttons and closures, I think, but we'll have a look at it. So this is McCall's 8411. I've had this for a couple years and I have not made it yet, but I want to. All right, so let's have a look at the back of this pattern. Again, this is McCall's 8411. It's for a bodysuit, a robe, shorts, and pants. Now for view A, the bodysuit, you need to have a knit fabric. So I probably will use like a solid coordinating knit fabric if I decide to make that, but honestly, I'm not a bodysuit kind of person. I might convert it to a tank top though. So anyway, yeah, we're not going to discuss that, but we're going to be looking at the robe, the shorts, and the pants. So this pattern goes, first of all, is rated as easy. And again, I think it will be, because I don't think there are any, yeah, it's all elastic. So you're not doing any buttons, you're not doing any zippers. It's all elastic. So this is definitely an easy pattern. So the size range for this pattern is a size 4 to 20. And if we look at that bust measurement for the size 4 is a 29.5. The waist is a 22-inch waist. And the hips are 31.5 inches. And then to use the size 20, you're going to have a 42-inch bust, a 34-inch waist, and a 44-inch hip. So that's the size range to help you figure out what size you would need to cut. And then it does have some finished garment measurements that you can have a look at. Does it? No, it does not. All this is loose fitting, so you don't really need it. And so let's get into the fabrics. I'm obviously going to be using cotton lawns, and some of the silkier cotton quilters cottons to make this. And for the robe, since I'm going to be using, well, I'm just going to go based on the 45-inch wide fabric. The cotton lawns that I carry are 60 inches wide, so I'll obviously use less. So for the robe, you're going to need a maximum of 4 yards if you're making the size 20, using the 45-inch wide fabric. And if you're down in the smaller range, the size 4 and 6, you're going to need about 3 3/4 yards of fabric. And then for the contrast, which is for the band and the tie belt, you're going to need another 2.5 yards maximum. And then you're going to need some interfacing. Okay. If we move down to the shorts, I definitely want to make all 3 of those pieces. If we look at the shorts, you're going to need less than 1 yard of fabric, whether you're using 45-inch wide fabric or 60-inch wide fabric. And then for the contrast, which is the yoke, the sides, the front, back, and the leg bands, you're going to need another less than 1 yard for no matter which size you use. So for your shorts, you're going to need a total of 2 yards of fabric maximum. And this is one of those, I mean, depending on what you sew, you might have some large scrap pieces that you can piece together to make this. Could be a fun way to use up like larger scraps. You just have to take your pattern pieces and just put them on your scraps and see if they fit. All right. And then the final item on here is the pants. They're going to come together just like the shorts. They're just longer, right? And so for that, you're going to need a maximum of 2 1/8 yard if you're using that 45-inch wide fabric for your main fabric. And then for the contrast, which is the yoke, the side, front, and back, and the bands, you're going to need another 1 1/8 yard maximum. So you're looking at a total of around like 3.5 yards if you're using 45-inch wide fabric max to make the pants. All right. So if you're making all 3 pieces, you're going to need, a good amount of fabric. Again, you can use 60-inch wide fabric and you'll need less fabric. And of course, if you already have in your fabric collection some rayons and things like that, they're going to work perfectly well as too. But again, this pattern is made for all those things. So I'm just going to get out the envelope quickly as we do here. Again, just to go over some of the basics, just to help you figure out, you know, what kind of skills you're going to need to create these pieces. So if we look here, here are all the different pattern pieces. There are a total of 28 different pieces. This is a piece heavy pattern because again, you're going to have separate pieces for all these places where it's a contrast, right? But it's still going to be a pretty easy thing to put together. So again, beginner, easy. Should this be your first ever sewing project? Probably not. But you certainly can do it if you have some basic sewing skills. Honestly, I think the hardest thing in the whole pattern is going to be the bodysuit because there is a lot of piecing. You have curvature, and that's one of those things. I mean, you want to get a good fit on a bodysuit, and you have to put on the snaps for that. Like I said, I'm probably not going to make that as a bodysuit, but I might alter it to make a top, tank top that I would wear with it. So let's get here. What we would be sewing is starting here on page 3. And so you're looking here at your robe piecing. It does have pockets on it. So that's great. Yeah, and then you got to piece together your band, put your facing on. But again, you don't have any like buttons or zipper closures to do. You just have to make your belt. You're going to have your inset sleeves. You're going to do a little gathering at the top of the sleeve, putting your band on. You do have to make a little belt loop, and you make your belt, and that's your robe. And you can see here they even put in the pants and the shorts together in the directions because they're really sewing them. You know, you're going to have the same basic sewing. It's just your pant piece is going to be longer than your short piece. So you can see here how you're adding on the band. You're going to have extra down here for your hem band that you're going to piece together here. It actually has a little side slit there. So that's the only thing. And I mean, you could change that if you don't want to have your side slit and just cut a straight band, you know, just sew it straight. And then you have elastic in the waist. You turn up your hem on your shorts, and then your pants here, you see how you have your little slit on the side of the pants. Okay? So it really is straightforward, not a ton of steps. You know, you just have some piecing to do before you do your basic sewing together of the pant legs. And yeah, elastic in the waist. So I think that's going to come together pretty easily. Maybe I'll record a sewing tutorial when I make mine. You can let me know in the comments if that's something you might be interested in. All right, so we're going to move on to the second pattern now. All right, so here's the second pattern I pulled for making some PJs and loungewear. This is McCall's 8056. Again, one that I've had for a while and just haven't sewn up. And this also has the robe, a top, and the pants. And you can easily cut these pants into shorts. Oh, it has it. Okay, so it already has it on there as shorts. So yeah, and it looks like the robe comes in 2 lengths. It is also rated as an easy pattern because again, you're just going to have an elastic waist because again, you just have an elastic waistband. The pattern goes from a size 8 up to a 24, and that's for, it has down here the finished garment measurements. It does have down here the finished garment measurements. So you can have a peek at all those numbers to figure out, you know, which size you would want to make. And it looks like it does have, this pattern might have different pattern pieces depending on your bust, because it says here AB bust and CB bust. So we'll see that when we get into the pattern pieces. If we look up here, if we look up here at the fabric requirements, you know, based on using 45-inch wide fabric, looks like the largest size you're going to need up to about 4.5 yards of fabric. If you're using 60-inch wide fabric like the cotton lawns, you're going to need about 3.25 yards fabrics for the maximum size. So here are the shorts, and it looks like no matter if you use 45 inch or 60-inch wide fabric, the maximum yardage you'll need is 1 yard of fabric. And then for the pants F, those are wider leg pant, you're going to need a maximum of like 2.25 yards of fabric. And then if you do the straight leg pants, you're going to need a maximum of around the same. A little bit less if you're using 40-inch wide fabric. Those, they might also be a little cropped, I'm not sure. And then you have your shirts, C and D. C has short sleeves, D has long sleeves. If we look here at C, for the short sleeve, you're going to need a maximum of 2 yards of fabric. And then for D, the long sleeve, you're going to need a maximum of 2.5 yards of fabric. Okay? Let's get this open, have a quick look at the line drawings and some of the directions. Okay, so again, this pattern has pieces and directions to make 2 different versions of a robe, a longer one and a shorter one. You get the long sleeve shirt, you get the short sleeve shirt, you get shorts, and then 2 different styles of pants. So you get a lot of things that you can create on this one pattern. Here are the pattern pieces. There are a total of 23 different pattern pieces. And you can see here, like over here, the wider leg on the pattern piece versus the tapered leg. And then you can look down here, it has it grouped here. So to make the robe and the belt, you're going to need 5 different pieces. To make the tops, whether you're making short sleeve or long sleeve, you're going to need, 7 different pattern pieces. So not a lot of piecing for most of these things, okay? So you can have a look there, and then let's have a quick scan of the directions. The robe and everything is going to be very similar to that first pattern I shared, McCall's 8411. This is just less piecing for the robe and then for the pants. So they're going to be pretty straightforward. Where you are going to spend a bit more time is if you make the shirts, right? Because, yeah, it's just a little bit more complicated. In this particular pajama top, you know, you have dart bust, you have the pocket, you have princess seams, you have a curved hem for one version, you have to put on your collar, you have your button blanket, putting your buttons on, inserting your sleeves, you have a band at your sleeve, hem at the wrist. So a little bit more detailed, not hard stuff, just, you know, extra beginner level skills. Here's the curved hemline that you'd need to do on view C. And then, yeah, and then the pants, again, are going to be pretty straightforward, as we talked about. Definitely easier to put together than the McCall's 8411 pants. And they also have an elastic waist. And here you don't have a separate waistband. You create a casing in the top of the fabric, you know, a fold over casing, and then insert your elastic to create your waistband. So the part here that, you know, will require some extra, you know, advanced beginner skills is to make the shirts. And, you know, if you want to play around with the pattern, you can skip the shirts. I mean, you can go to the store and get cotton tank tops and t-shirts to sleep in with your new robe and pants if you want, right? So, but I do like this pattern. I like that it has the 2 different lengths because, you know, when it's a little warmer, you want to have a little bit of a shorter robe. In the winter, you want to have a little bit of a longer robe. I do like the little detail at the hem of the pants. I just think it's cute. So I do want to finally make this in 2026. Let me know if you might be interested in a sew along for this one as well. And then the final pajama pattern, or I mean, this is not technically pajamas, but loungewear for me. I've been wanting to make this for like all year. I pulled fabrics and again, never really cut it out, but I think this is going to be cute to have wearing around the house in the warmer weather, but it's also something that I could like run to the store in or, you know, be out in the garden in and feel like, you know, I don't have pajamas on. And so this is Simplicity 9756. And you can see here, you're going to have the pattern for the top and the pants. And then it's kind of like, I don't know what you call this, but this other top, I'm probably not going to make that. I'm going to be making A and B. And so if we look at the back here, it says here, Mrs. and Women's shirt, pants, and halter top. That's what it was. That word escaped me, halter top. And so, yeah, you're obviously going to need to install buttons, and then the pant waist is elastic. If we look here at the size range of the pattern, it goes from a size 10 up to a 28. Again, just to show you the measurements to help you figure out, you know, what pattern size range you need to buy. For that smaller size, the size 10 is saying a bust of 32.5 inches, a waist of 25 inches, and hips at 34.5. And all the way up to the larger size, the 28, it is a 50-inch bust, 44-inch waist, 52-inch hips. All right. It does have some finished garment measurements here that you can have a look at to help you decide on your size. And then if we go in here and look at the fabric requirements for your shirt, again, depending on if you're using a cotton lawn or the quilter's cotton, which is 44 inches wide, you're going to need anywhere from 2 5/8 yards of fabric up to 4 yards of fabric. And then for the pants, you're going to need anywhere from 1 7/8 yards of fabric up to 3 yards of fabric. And then for the halter top, if you decide to do that, I'm pretty sure the halter top, you probably need knit fabric. Let me see. No, you don't. So that's a woven halter top, it seems. You're going to need anywhere from 1 yard up to 1.5 yards to make that, all right? Here's a look at the details on the back of that top. Really, really cute. And then, you know, it's just loose flowing wide leg pants. And then there's the back of the halter top. Okay, so again, here's a look at the flat line drawings. And then here's a look at the pattern pieces. You have 19 pattern pieces for these 3 different items. And so, for example, for the pants, I mean, you're going to have probably, 2 or 3 pattern pieces to sew together. Yeah, because I think the waistband is separate. But not a ton of piecing to do. Let me see. Did I say what this is rated? Let me see if they rated this on the back. So they rated this as average. And again, I'm sure it's because of the details in the 2 tops, for the top A and for the halter top. The pants are super easy. All right, so let's just do a quick scan of the directions here. And you can see you're going to have your buttonhole blanket for the top. You can do some pleating at the sleeve. You have a yoke neck at the back. And it looks like it's a lined yoke. You have your collar and your collar band. We talked about that earlier in Vlogmas. And then, yeah, you got your sleeve to insert. You do have a button band at the wrist, along with some gathering. So yeah, this is going to definitely be more intermediate sewing skills to do this top, or advanced beginner, however you rate yourself for those skills. And then here, the pants. This is the easiest thing to make in the pattern again. You just have some pockets to insert, sewing together your pants, adding your waistband and your elastic. We'll have a quick peek at the halter top, even though that's not something that I plan to make, but in case you do. So there's a little peek at some of the directions there. And how is this closing? Okay, so I was wrong. You do, yeah, you have to put a zipper. I was wondering if this is not knit fabric, how you get this on. So this has a zipper, looks like at the side. Okay. So that is Simplicity 9756. Okay, so again, let me know in the comments if you have any interest in seeing sew-alongs for any of these. Sewing alongs, you know, they're a little time consuming for me, and usually when I'm sewing for myself, because I spend so much time sewing for others, like I just like to be in the zone, not worrying about recording things and camera angles and all that. But I will, you know, maybe do one of these if there's enough interest. We'll see. Let me know in the comments if you're interested. And yeah, I can try to remember to do that. I definitely want to make them. That's the one thing, if I commit to doing a sewing along, then I know I will get it sewn right. That's the upside of doing a sew along or tutorial. So anyway, those are the 3 pajama / lounge wear patterns that I want to sew for myself in 2026. All right, thanks for watching. I'll see you all back here for Vlogmas Day 13. Bye.